Welcome back, everybody. We're here working on our shipping box for our action figures and our promo image for Hypercharge. And we've run into some issues. The big one that we have here is everything is showing up on the inside of this box. And then the other issue is that these logos are in the wrong positions now. On this side and that side, stuff's overlapping, so we need to address that as well. But let's do this one at a time. And this is going to be a very, very information-heavy video right here before we dive into another feature of InstaMAT that is insanely powerful. So this is kind of a preemptive warm-up. Let's just look at how we can get this masked off. So one thing we could do is go up here to the top of our masking stack inside of this multi-channel layer. And we've already used a UV shell mask before, which is really convenient. You pick your UV islands. But let's just say that you didn't want to have to sit here and hand pick every UV island and so on and so forth. What if your mesh came with vertex colors? Let's just see if this mesh has vertex colors. I'm over here in my settings menu, right up here in the top left. You can see the little gear. Down here in the environment settings, we can change our render mode to vertex colors. And I did indeed pre-plan for this asset and assign vertex colors of blue to the inside of the box and red to the outside of the box. So we can use these color values as a way of saying we want artwork to show up in one spot and not another. So let's switch back to PBR. And I'm going to select the vertex color mask. And if you don't find it, you can just pick in your library. The thing you need to be aware of is that when you make your selection for your vertex color mask, is that you are picking the mask color where you want something to show up. And that is based off of your blending method, and the default blending method is multiply. So we're going to select white. Or sorry, I'm going to select red. And that ultimately creates a black and white mask. So where the red vertex colors are now white, and that's used as a mask to multiply over everything else and create a black mask over top of everything that's on the inside that's not red. And that works out great, but how do you even assign vertex colors? That is something that we're going to look in our next video, in the entire process of how we can do that inside of InstaMAT. And so please stay tuned and please watch the rest of this video. There's a lot of other different techniques I'm going to show here. But we're going to use this as our launching point to dive into element graphs inside of InstaMAT. So we could just use a vertex color mask if you have vertex colors assigned. However, we still have this lip because it's a predeformed model, and we have to address that. So what's a good way that we can address that? We could just go ahead and add in a really awesome mask that I found, and that is the mesh polygon mask. So you can see this is connecting against individual vertices and seeing that they intersect with this volume. So let's just turn on our wireframe. Over here on the toolbar, we have this cross with the dots. That's how we turn our wireframe on. So we just click it on and off. And now we get a better visual representation of what's really happening with this mask. And it's a completely uniform volume. There's no non-uniform control. And in most cases, from my experience working with this so far, is you really only need something like this. And it doesn't need to be a cube. It could also be a sphere. They do allow that option inside of here for the mesh polygon mask. But if we go ahead and set this projection blend method to subtractive, then now everything's taken care of. Now the other thing that we have to pay attention to is that I've put these at the very top of this masking stack inside of this multi-channel layer. So let's just pretend for a minute that maybe you go on vacation and another artist picks up this project and they need to work on it. How can you future-proof that so that you know that if they had to do that, they're not going to need to worry about whether or not they're placing everything underneath or paying attention to specific blend methods if they stacked other masks on top of this. The best way to probably do that is to put everything into its own folder and add these masks to that folder. And if you've used other 2D software, you'll be very familiar with what that entails. You just select the actual layer that you want to work on. We're going to hit our folder button, put that in, that automatically puts that into the folder. We'll call this artwork. And now we're going to take our masks that we made before, and we're just going to drag those on top of the folder there. And we have to do these individually. And now that I've done that, any artist could pick this up, open this project up. There's a folder called artwork. This artwork folder is being masked by these two functions, and then this layer is where anything else happens for branding. So it makes more sense to somebody else that's going to pick up the project. So always just try to be forward thinking, and even for yourself, because sometimes, you know, you'll start a project, you'll say it's finished, you'll call it done, and then you have to pick it up months later. You want to kind of just give yourself enough footwork to work around that if you were to pick that project up and know exactly where you need to put things without having to scratch your head and wonder, what am I doing wrong? This sort of thing just really helps to be proactive in your work. So let's just pretend, for instance, that we don't have these masks at all. Just so that we can look at the logos. So what's really happening with these logos being in the wrong place? This Nabro logo, for instance, let's look at that. Now, if we look at our projection mode, we're using a triplanar projection. So if I slide it this way on the Z, you can see it moves it on this side and that side. So it shows up correctly on this side of the box and meets our branding standards, but over on this side it doesn't, because now it's on the right, and that's because it's projecting on the positive and negative X value, positive and negative Z value, and positive and negative Y value as well. So anytime that you use triplanar projection, while it can be very fast and effective, in this use case scenario, you want to be able to control exactly where those logos are going. And in this case, we're going to need to switch over from a triplanar projection to a decal. And as you can see, if I pull this volume away, it's not going to do anything because it's not intersecting with any of the mesh. If I put my wireframe on, we can see that a little bit better. And now we're getting the projection on only one part of this mesh, exactly where this volume resides. However, it's still putting stuff on the inside. Now, we are protected because we did set up that vertex color mask, but let's just pretend that we didn't even have any vertex colors at all. Let's just imagine that none of that existed. How could we fix this? We would just need to look at our decal, and down here in the decal section, it has a normal fall off. So right now it's set to 0, so it's going to look at the positive and the negative of the Z value. For this decal, it always is reliant on the positive Z value first and foremost. But if you crank that fall off up a little bit, it's going to cancel out the negative Z value. So if I crank it up just a smidge, and we're going to ignore everything on the negative Z value. Now, a better example of seeing how this works is probably right about here for the DCC logo, because we have this lip. So I'm going to select my DCC logo, and I'm going to switch that from triplanar to decal. And slide this guy back over. And you can see it's stretching over the top here, right? And that is because of that normal fall off. Now I could sit here and scale this decal like so, and get it right on the edge of this, and it still totally works. I'm sure if you've worked in Unreal before and you've used decals, you're very familiar with scaling down your decals appropriately so that they don't stretch over any other surface. But let's set that Z value back to the same as the other ones. And we can just rely wholeheartedly on our normal fall off. So I'm just going to crank that normal fall off up, and you can see how that just disappears. Once you get past like about 1.3 or so, it just totally cancels out. And that's all set to go. Now we would have to do this for each individual logo here for every single side. So that would mean I duplicate this, and I know it needs to be on the right, so I'm going to put it on the right. And I'm not seeing anything, but that's because the decal relies on the positive Z values. So I'm going to take the rotation and I'm going to edit that value on the Y and add 90 degrees. And then that comes right back. But as you can imagine, this turns into, I'm going to have 40 CC logos, 4 hypercharge logos, 4 this side is up, etc., etc., etc. And that's going to take a lot of time for me to simply place this on every single portion of the box that I need it on. Not very effective, not something I really want to keep doing over and over and over again. And it creates a huge masking stack inside of this one multi-channel layer that's just problematic. You know, you would have to then, like, let's say the client came back and said one of the sponsors is no longer going to be a part of the project. We need to swap it with this other company's logo. Then you'd have to select each one of these logos, change it to the other logo. It's just too much. It's not very efficient. So we're going to look at how we can approach this as one single decal that we then only create 4 times around this asset. And to do that, we're going to do it inside of an element graph. So this is just kind of our launching point. We're going to look at 1 in the next video, how we can make mesh vertex colors. And then 2, in the video after that, we're going to look at how we can set up a individual mask in an element graph to then be applied as a decal all the way across this box. So I really appreciate you taking the time to sit here and listen through this video and follow along. I hope it was very informative, and we're going to be tackling some of the coolest stuff in InstaMAT and the element graphs starting in the next video. So thank you very much for watching.